If you're not careful and no clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the back rooms, where it's nothing but the stink of old, moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights at maximum hum buzz, and approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because it sure as hell has heard you. If you've seen these words before, then you're likely familiar with the backrooms. A uniquely unsettling idea that showed up on 4chan in 2019 that was accompanied by photographs of yellowed interiors of a building that you could practically smell. The concept quickly found fertile soil in the minds of online horror fans. It wasn't long until we saw more people adding to the mythos of the backrooms, with photographs and stories quickly growing into independent films, video games, and more. Along with the backrooms themselves, we also got a great deal of bizarre imagery of dead malls, underground swimming pools, stairways to nowhere, and more examples of supremely unsettling architecture around this time that grew into their own creepypastas and internet spook stories, which developed their own splinter followings. This kind of imagery is referred to as liminal space, or a liminal aesthetic. Liminal space, by definition, is a space that is meant to be transitory, but which is viewed outside its normal context. Not only that, but these places tend to be rife with both nostalgia and a feeling of eeriness, because you're viewing them outside their accepted state of being. Now, this wasn't a new term or idea by the time the backrooms and its imitators came onto the scene, but this sudden influx of liminal imagery, stories, and so on made this rather niche idea into a pop culture phenomenon that became widely recognizable in a rather short period of time, hence the sudden popularity of the term. For most people, though, just reading the definition of the word liminal doesn't really help. Even if you understand the words, they're kind of ephemeral. Most people need a more concrete example of liminal space to really drive this concept home in a way they can come to grips with. That's why I'd like to take a moment to tell you all a story about my first brush with the feeling of this kind of liminal horror. When I was in college, I held down several jobs as a security guard. It was flexible with hours, the jobs weren't usually difficult, and I could get at least some of my reading done while I was on the clock. One of the assigned locations I had shifts in for about 2 to 3 months was a local mall that I knew pretty well. I'd spent a lot of time in it as a kid, and even as a teen, so walking my rounds wasn't anything special. However, when it came time to shut the place down, I was the one who had to walk back from the front doors to the security office, set the alarm, and then step out the back door before it was armed. That short walk was one of the longest, eeriest experiences of my life. Everything about the place was wrong. The storefronts, once brightly lit and inviting, were shuttered behind rolling doors and only emergency lights were left on, making the whole place feel unfriendly and closed off. The overhead lights were off as well, adding deep shadows in places where there had only been bright lights before. And the thing it took me the longest to identify was that the fountains had been turned off. With no other people and no other sounds, it is amazing how loud your normal footsteps are in a place like that. Even though I had just spent the past 8 hours in that building, and even though I knew there was nothing present that hadn't been there 20 minutes before, the whole place felt like a mirrored nightmare version of itself that always had me on edge until that security door closed behind my back. Most people, if they think about it, have had an experience like this in their pasts too. For example, Have you ever been inside a train station when the service wasn't running and no one was around? Or have you ever pulled over to a highway rest stop that felt utterly abandoned, either in the dead of night where the rest of the world seemed invisible, or in a wide, flat place where you could see for miles and miles that there was nothing between you and the horizon? Did you ever find yourself wandering the halls of your school long after the students and teachers had gone home, and you got a feeling there was something wrong just beneath the surface of this familiar place? Have you ever been staying in a hotel where it felt like you were the only guests there, the quiet halls stretching off far further than they should, without so much as a housekeeper or fellow guest in sight? Feeling like there was just door after silent door, all the wall lamps set in perfect rows, and the carpet's pattern drawing your eyes, you lost track of the distance you'd walked. All of these are examples of what it feels like to experience a liminal space. Most importantly, however, is the feeling that these aesthetics generate in us under these circumstances. That eerie sensation that something is wrong has a name, and it's one some of you may be familiar with. It is the feeling of the uncanny. If something is uncanny, it is, by definition, strange and difficult to explain. Uncanny is a perfect term for that unsettling feeling you get in your dreams when you know something is wrong, but you can't put your finger on just what it is. There's even a theory that you may have heard of called the Uncanny Valley, which describes this feeling of unease we get in response to things that look human, but which are subtly off. From realistic dolls to androids to mannequins and clown makeup, it's thought by some that this uncomfortable sensation we feel is a programmed response in the human mind inherited from our forebears when it was an evolutionary advantage to be able to tell whether something that looked human was truly one of our own, or if it was merely convincing enough that it could get close to us. But what does all of this have to do with Changeling the Lost? You remember your home. You remember what it was like before they took you. The sound of your family's voices, the smell of your home, the colors of your neighborhood. Even after the blinding glories and pitiless dark wastes of Fairy, you remember. Your memories were a beacon. Without them, you would never have found your way back through the twisting maze of the thorns to collapse, torn and exhausted on the cruel earth of the world you were born into once more. Only to find that your home was no longer yours. That an imposter had taken over your life. That you had been changed. Yours is beauty and grotesquerie, illusion and iron, insight and madness. Where will you go now that you are lost? Who will you love? Who will you war against? Who will you make of yourself? How will your tale end? Changeling the Lost was the fifth game released for the new Chronicles of Darkness, published by White Wolf. In this game, you played regular people who are kidnapped by immortal, godlike beings from another dimension. A place known as Arcadia, where the will of these creatures is not just the law of the land, but the very laws that govern reality itself. These beings, known as the True Fae, drag people through the world between, a place known as the Hedge, where the thorns tear at their souls. The true Fae fill those empty places in with magic, and change these people. Some of them devolve into beasts, kept as hunting hounds or lap cats to amuse their new masters. Others turn into pale, silent things that fear the light and live deep in the shadows. Some will become beautiful beyond compare, and others will be marked by cruelty and violence, growing into terrible, vindictive monsters. No two changelings are ever the same. Each of them becomes their own unique tragedy at the hands of the true Fae, and they are set to fill some task or duty in that true Fae's little corner of Arcadia. A changeling's story truly begins when they escape this place, though. When they slip the chains of the one who kept them in this other realm, and they retreat back through the hedge to the real world that they were stolen from. The changeling emerges only to find that they, the world, or both, have changed. Perhaps they were gone for a day that lasted a decade, and no one would believe that the grown man before them is the 10-year-old boy the cops just started looking for less than 24 hours ago. Perhaps they were gone only a little while, but decades have passed for the rest of the world, and now everyone they ever knew is either long gone, or living out their final days in nursing homes, barely aware of anything around them. And even if a particular changeling is one of the lucky ones, who could step back into their old life if they wanted to, chances are good that the true Fae left them a parting gift. Something that looks like their old self, sounds like their old self, and that thinks it is their old self. A creature made of fallen leaves, broken glass, and stolen dreams called a fetch that has been living their life every day they were gone. Changelings are characters that are tied to two very different worlds, which are constantly pulling them in two different directions. On the one hand, they have the world of concrete and steel where the laws of physics hold sway, and where they lived the whole of their mortal lives. On the other hand, they have the lure of fairy and the power of its magic. A world where pacts and promises are the true power, and where a whisper of magic can allow one to do the impossible. They straddle a divide that pulls at both their bodies and their minds, leading them down spiraling depths of madness as they attempt the impossible task of existing in two worlds that often reject the other. They are creatures in transition, not yet true Fae themselves, but no longer truly human. For the longest time, I had difficulty figuring out how to describe the horror of this game. While there are elements of body horror or existential horror or even cosmic horror, none of those really felt like the true heart of the game. The core of this game was more ephemeral, and catching it was like trying to put a dream in a bottle so you could show it to other people. The more I think about it, though, the more I feel that Changeling The Lost is a game that really shines when looked at through the lens of liminal horror. And nowhere is this clearer than when it comes to a major aspect of the game that both players and storytellers alike seem to really have trouble coming to grips with. An aspect which, in many ways, is the primary example of what makes this game so fantastically strange and utterly bizarre. The realm known as the Hedge.
If you don't watch where you put your feet, or which doors you open, this place is where you'll wind up. It's an endless sea of hungry green, where the thorns are thirsty for your blood, and the wind whispers secrets in your ear. It's a place where all the doors back home are closed unless you know the secret password, and where all roads lead to places you don't want to go. The worst part is, Even if you do escape, you never really get away from it. It's behind every door, reflected in every window, and lurking just off 1,000 lost and forgotten roads. You'll never get the stink of it off you, and eventually, you won't even want to anymore.
Ian Jacoby, Hedge Ranger of the Iron Spear. The hedge is a boundary between the mortal world and the realm of Arcadia, where the true Fey holds sway. It is a place filled with Fey magic, yes, but it is also a place where at least some rules exist, even if those rules appear to be nonsensical or arbitrary to many. It is the halfway place between the mortal world and the realm of the true Fey, a place formed from both, but which is property of neither. When one steps into the hedge through one of the various gateways from the mortal side, the hedge seems to mimic our world at first. There will be huge apartment complexes of creeping vines and low shrubs shaped like parked cars. Bent-back trees will shine with otherworldly lights like street lamps, and one might even find stretches of black road that look almost like asphalt, until you touch them and realize they're warm and sweating. The further one steps away from that boundary, though, the stranger and stranger this locale becomes. While one may glimpse pieces of the familiar in the sea of green, they will always be out of place and bizarre. Whether it's a mall kiosk map in the middle of an open field telling you where you are, or a bus stop along a game trail with a schedule that makes no sense, or even a cinder block rest stop with a vaguely threatening aura, there's no telling what you're going to encounter in this place. Like the backrooms, the size of the hedge is unknown. It could be as small as the size of Earth, or as large as the cosmos itself. Even more unsettling, though, the hedge is not a static location. It is constantly in flux, altering and changing like an ocean. While there are locations in the hedge that will remain anchored, like the highways known as trods, certain gateways in and out of the realm, and the layers and living spaces known as hollows where Fey creatures make their homes, everything else is subject to change without notice. Nothing in the hedge can be relied on, and no road is guaranteed to go to the same place twice. Imagine experiencing that for a moment. You're walking a road that you've been down a dozen times before, following a route that you know by feel. But as you look around, you realize there are now cornfields where there was deep forest before. There's a lake you don't remember, the waters lapping at the shore as if they were trying to haul themselves up. You know this is the way, but everything is different, and everything is wrong. Would it be stranger if this path actually led to the destination you'd originally set off toward? Or would it be more comforting if a path that was this changed from when you'd last walked it actually led you to a different place, so you could take comfort in the fact that you'd only lost your sense of direction instead of your mind? Now picture every moment of your life filled with that kind of uncertainty. Everywhere you go, everything you do, contains a seed of that uncanny feeling. Even places that should feel safe and familiar are tainted by it, and you can never be sure if something is genuinely wrong or if your mind is simply eating itself as it tries to reconcile this feeling of wrongness. And the harder you try to hold on to your sanity, the more it seems to slip through your fingers. And it isn't just the world around you that feels this way. It's you as well. Your body was transformed into a living candle, a stunted, kobold-like craftsman, a bent-backed ogre, or a snarling hound. Returning to the mortal world didn't change what you became. but the magic of your being hides it from mortals' eyes. Not from your own, though. How bizarre must it be to know what you are, to be able to look at your own fey-wrought form, and to have the people around you just not react? Something that might make you wonder if you'd truly lost your mind, until you find more of your own kind and realize that some people can see you for who you are, and what you've become. The tagline for Changeling is a game of beautiful madness, and while it's a very evocative turn of phrase, it can be hard to really grasp the essence of that feeling for everyone at the table, precisely because it is so vague. It's dreamlike. That's what makes this game stand out so much in general, but particularly when compared to the rest of the World in Chronicles of Darkness settings. As a game, Changeling The Lost is flexible enough to include a variety of flavors of horror, each of which will add something to the overall soup of your chronicle. However, underpinning all of it is that uncertainty of your own mind, that uncanny feeling that everything around you is subtly off, and that even the most mundane of changes is hiding a secret threat that you can feel, but which you can't see. The heart of this game is that feeling of being trapped in a dream that you can't wake up from. That uncertainty of wondering whether the life you think you're living is really you, or if it's that other life that seems so far away that is the real truth. It's that sensation evoked by walking through dead malls, of seeing your teacher out in public for the first time, or of waking up to find something sitting in your chair, watching you in the dark, and trying to remember whether or not you put away your laundry before you turned out the lights, or if you were really in danger. Changeling the Lost is a game about the demi-monde between waking and dreaming, between the mortal and the fey, and between clarity and madness. And one of the best ways I have found to describe that is to refer to it as a role-playing game that really embraces the idea, and often the aesthetic, of liminal horror. Thank you for staying to the end of this video. I wanted to try something different here on the Azukail Games channel, and this is something that's been brewing in my mind for a little while now. If you enjoyed my thoughts on this subject, then please give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it around on your own social media feed to help other people come across it. Additionally, if you enjoyed the video essay format, please let me know in the comments. If you'd like to see me tackle some more topics from the World in Chronicles of Darkness games and settings, feel free to make some suggestions as well, as I want to make sure viewers like you get the kind of videos they want to see. Lastly, if you want to help support the channel so we can keep putting out videos like this one, consider buying us a Ko-fi, becoming a Patreon patron, or grabbing some of the supplements linked in the video description below.